Hello everyone, welcome to Factorio C Block. I'm Bobbin and you're watching episode 13. I have belts with metal on them, lots of plates. I've got, looks like a full belt of iron, a full belt of copper, a full belt of steel, and I've gone ahead and run tin and lead on the same belt. For now, I think I probably will have to split that apart because this particular pack, the way the research works, I think it's going to consume more lead and tin than you would normally have in a Bobs and Angels setup. But that said, I've got stuff on a belt, and it's metal, and it's going to be ready to do circuits and research pretty soon. Probably between this episode and the next one is when I'll set that up. I don't have it set up yet. Anyway, let's see where this is coming from. I am on the southern end of my base near the power plant right now. And if I just start running up here, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And these belts are full, and they go way on up here, all the way up to the extreme northern end of the base where it ends. So let's see how this is being produced, because I put in ore sorting, and there's a great deal of it here. Just coming in here and looking at this, I've got ore sorting machines in, and I've got blast furnaces, and I've got induction furnaces and casting machines, and just all kinds of stuff going on up here. Let's follow through one of these and see what's happening here precisely, and then we're going to set up another metal that I don't have set up already. Now down here where I have my crystallizers running and I'm producing the metals, I have shuffled things around a little bit, and I am now producing sapphirite on 4 of them, and bobmonium on 1, and rubite on 1. I'm not producing stereotype anywhere. And just to look at the sapphirite as an example, it comes out of here and goes down a belt and through a crusher. There's no problem with this crusher handling the output. I want to say that one of these crushers can handle 4 or 8 crystallizers rather, and right now it's only doing 4. Once the ore is crushed, the crushed stone comes out here and is disposed of as usual. It goes into mineralized water that's feeding the algae farms. And it comes up here and it goes into a sorter. The sorter splits it into, and that's noisy, it splits it into 1 part slag, 1 part copper, and 2 parts iron. And it's going to come out of here. The slag, actually, let's follow the slag first. It comes out and it goes down this belt that's going in reverse and comes down all the way down through here and rejoins the input from the electrolyzers. So the slag is simply recycled. The copper and the iron ore, on the other hand, go up into this area, which is sort of set up as a bus for ores. Just like down here we have sort of a bus for the crushed Angels ores, here we have one for the metal ores coming out of sorting. And it goes into a blast furnace. So we've got iron going into this one and copper going into this one. And once we get 24 in here, this uses fuel and it converts it into ingots. The ingots then come up here and they go on this area that's sort of like a bus for ingots, and comes up here into the induction furnace where the ingots are melted down into liquid metal, and the liquid metal flows down a pipe into the casting machine and is made into plates and put on a belt. This is the Angels ore sorting and metal processing scenario. There are a couple of things about it that are maybe just a little difficult to understand. Let's start at the bottom with the sorting and talk about that first. A common thing that is pointed out when people go and do the calculation is that if you start with a pile of saffrite and you want to end with a pile of iron, the question comes up, what is the most efficient way? And when people crunch the numbers and they get the answer, they find that the most efficient way is in fact just to smelt the saffrite. Don't go through ore sorting. And that eventually becomes not true if you research enough technology. You have to go way down the tech tree for it to make a difference, though. But the key point here is that the way the question is phrased, how do I get from a pile of saffrite to a pile of iron, isn't really how the ore sorting process is intended to work. What it's intended to do is to take you from a pile of ore to a pile of plates. And so, without designating necessarily quite so specifically what it is. And so what we're actually doing here is we are getting more plates total out of this saffrite than we would to smelt it any other way until we get a lot further down the tech tree. We're still sort of at the first tier here. But I'm not getting just iron out of my saffrite. I'm getting a combination of iron, copper, and steel. And the particular proportions are a little bit variable between the iron and the steel. But I'm getting more total plates out, even if you were to look at it just in terms of iron and copper. It's not a lot more, it's just a little more. But this opens up getting nearly twice as much steel out for the same amount of iron, which is a huge advantage since steel is extremely expensive in this mod pack. And so that's the better way to look at it. Look at it not as how can I get the most iron out of my saffrite, but rather how can I get the most plates out of my ore. Anyway, continuing on up, the next part that gets a little confusing is you take this ore and you run it into here and it goes into ingots, and then you run it into here and the ingots become plates. And you might ask the question, why do I bother going through ingots? Is there some bonus to going through ingots? Well, the way we're doing it now, not really, because what happens is you get 24 ore into here, and you get 24 plates out, and in the middle you have 24 ingots. Now this is actually a higher yield than smelting the ore directly. Smelting the ore directly we would only get, I think, 18 plates out. But why have this intermediate of ingots? Why not just have this machine spit out plates? And the reason is because there are the ingots are sort of an intermediate stage in the metal that allows you to do metal mixing. And we're not doing any of that right now, so I can't really show it. Some of it would be fairly obvious, like mixing things together to form alloys. Another possibility is to stretch your metals. If we go into FNEI here and we look up, let's just look up iron. Here is, do I have the liquid in here? Yeah, I do. Okay, here's molten iron, and it can be made from ingots, and we're going to get 12 iron ingots in. It's going to make 120 molten iron, and I'll just go ahead and tell you 10 molten iron is a plate. So this goes from ingots to plates, and this is actually what's going on in this induction furnace right now. If we move up, we can also take 12 iron ingots and 12 manganese ingots. We don't have any manganese ingots right now. This is another tier of technology, but that will get us 240 molten iron. So this is a way to take excess manganese that you've got and basically convert it into iron. So that is one of the things that we're doing here. We are currently taking and making some of these into steel, and I will show you that in a minute. But that's what's going on here. That's why you have the intermediate step. The intermediate step also serves to keep you from going backwards when you do that stretch. If you're stretching your metal in the way that I just showed you, it's a one-way thing, because once you convert these ingots into liquid, they can't be turned back into ingots unless it's into some other kind of ingot. Okay, so let's take a look at the various smelting processes. I do have sorting going on, and here we're getting, out of the sorter, we're getting copper and iron from our saffrite, and we're getting tin and silicon out of our bobmonium, and we're getting lead and nickel out of our rubite. And I'm only smelting right now the four basic ones that you would expect: the iron, the copper, the tin, and the lead. And the iron, the copper, and the tin all work the same way. They basically take ore in and fuel, and they convert it into ingots. The lead is a little different. The lead requires oxygen as an additional input, and it produces sulfur dioxide as a waste product that I have to deal with. So the sulfur dioxide, in keeping with the idea that I don't like to throw things away if I have a possibility of using them later. After all, to get this sulfur dioxide, I had to run an electrolyzer at over 300 kilowatts of power. So this sulfur dioxide comes down here, goes down this long pipeline, and comes into the sulfur plant here that's providing sulfuric acid for these machines. And this is getting pretty messy inside here, but it comes in here, and this machine is now working in, this makes sulfur dioxide. It's now working in overflow mode only. So sulfur dioxide from the smelting process gets preference for being made into acid. That means that we're accumulating sulfur in this box just a little bit faster than we otherwise would. So that's what's going on right now. I'm piling up sulfur from that. It's kind of slow. It's not as much sulfur as you might imagine. But that's what's going on there. The other thing that I've got going on here is I'm making steel ingots. Steel ingots don't have an ore for input. They have iron ingots as input, and they also take oxygen. There are other steel recipes. There are actually other recipes for most of these things as you get more technology, but this is the basic steel. And so my iron ingots are actually coming out of this machine, and they are going on here, and it is being treated as a bus. They come up here, they get split, and they go into the either make production into iron plates, or they come across here and they go down and they get converted into steel ingots, and the steel ingots then get made into steel plates. So that is what is going on there. So that's the basic process. Let's go ahead and set up one of these things, a little bit of it anyway. This silicon, eventually we're going to need silicon ingots or silicon plates out of it. We can also use silicon ingots to stretch our iron when we get the appropriate technology. At the moment, there's nothing I can do with them. I don't even have the glass technology that would let me make it into glass. That's probably the more immediate use for it, so I probably won't just continuously turn them into ingots, but I'm going to go ahead and set up smelting for that right now so we can sort of see what's going on with it. So to make that happen, I would need to pull the silicon out of here, and I need to send it to a blast furnace. And I've been keeping 3 spaces between these, unless, like this one, I have to do something weird with piping. So 1, 2, 3. Let's make this into silicon ingots, and we can see it's going to require an additional input of carbon, which we don't have here. But if we go ahead and put a splitter on this, just like these others, put it right there, we can get some fuel in here. Where's the, there we go. And we'll just run this across. That is the wrong direction. I also probably, well, everywhere else I've done this, I've gone ahead and used, I've sort of bridged it a little better, like that, just to leave the front of that machine open in case I need to access it for some reason. So we'll continue to do that. So now I'm getting fuel in here, and I need to get the silicon ore up here. And in all of these others, where did I do that? I did it... oh, here's where it is on the lead. Okay, So I need a splitter to come through here, and just to make sure I've got it set up in the same place on all of them to keep it neat, it goes right there. So I'll run it up there and across here. So we should see silicon going in there. Okay, now for now I'm going to let the ingots pile up. I am going to go ahead and set an output on the machine as a location for it to pull it out, but I think I'm just going to pull out one segment of belt maybe and just let them sit there on that dead end belt. Most of them will stay in the machine, and this will serve as a placeholder for where I need to keep other belts in conjunction with it, because I've got to bring carbon over here. This recipe does require carbon, and I knew this was going to come up a long time ago. That's why I have carbon on a belt over here, and I also set aside a spot to run the belts through here. So carbon's going to come through here. Charcoal will also be necessary for this process. I think for the nickel. The nickel is going to be a complicated one, and I'm going to have to set up a carbon monoxide production plant to do nickel. But I don't have the technology for it yet. Alright. So I am out of undergrounds. Where can I make some more? So sort of the question here is, where do I want to bring it in? I think I'm going to go ahead and bring it across here and put a splitter there, and I will put it in there from the top and underground it across like that. And one thing I should do is I should see if I can avoid sending the... It may be going out the wrong side here to do it that way, but let's see what happens if we filter this. I can filter it for the other component if I need to. Let's filter it for carbon. Carbon is here. Okay, so carbon is going to come out the top, and only the top. That's not going to send the carbon the rest of the way down, is it? So really, I don't want to filter it, because if I do it this way, then I'm not going to get any carbon going downstream, and I may need it downstream. So let's not do that. It's just that the charcoal will not go in the machine. I don't think anything will happen to it. I think it will just back up there. Let's verify that. So charcoal has stopped, but carbon is still going in, and silicon ingots are being made, and we just spit out our first batch of them right there. So that's setting up this machine. If we were going to continue to do this to get the plates out, I would have to bring it up here, and it would be a setup just like this, because this machine doesn't have quite so many complicated recipes. It's usually pretty straightforward. Send in ingots and get out the liquid metal and just cast it into plates. But I don't need silicon plates right now, and I will eventually, but that's how we get that one done. And different recipes have different inputs here. When I get to, for example, nickel, to make nickel ingots, I'm going to need carbon monoxide. Now there are other recipes for some of these. This one wants a nickel cathode. That's a rather complicated thing to make. And here we're going to input some nickel ingots from some other process, or maybe just loop them around, and some nickel carbonyl, which is made through a complicated process involving pellets and carbon monoxide and sulfur. It's fairly complicated to get some of this stuff in. Basically, as your technology increases, the recipes become more complicated. So what else have I got going on here? Not too much, really. Mostly I worked on the metals. I also did do some stuff with the agriculture, just really playing around with it. I haven't done much of it except do some research. I need some more exploration tokens, and I need to automate green science in order to really get more of the research done on this. But I do have some options here. If I wanted to set up some of these components, like bring some sand over and pump some water in this thing and put some seeds in it, I could grow some crops. The crops look like they're going to be an interesting source of a number of things. Let's take a look at one of these. We'll just look at this benafran for a moment. And unfortunately, you can't look those up in here necessarily. Let's see. Where is... If I can find the right... Here we go, benafran seed. We put this in and we grow it and we get some benafran out. And the benafran can be, let's see, it can be made into beans or more seeds. If we make it into beans, it can be made into nutrient pulp or raw vegetable oil. I think raw vegetable oil can be processed. It'll produce vegetable oil and more nutrient pulp doing it this way. Yeah, that's what you do. You can use either a charcoal filter or a ceramic filter. You get slightly different results out. The vegetable oil, it can be made into fuel oil and base mineral oil. So this is a way eventually to get, through lots of extra processing, some of the components from oil. Now, if we're just getting fuel oil and base mineral oil out, we aren't getting all the components, but this is potentially a way to get it that doesn't involve quite so many inputs. I mean, if you're doing oil from crude oil in this pack, you've got to use sulfuric wastewater, for example, as one of your materials that's the input. And unfortunately, sulfuric wastewater isn't something you can just make in a machine on its own. Sulfuric wastewater is a byproduct of making other things, which could be a little inconvenient. So this could supplement your oil there. It may actually be a fairly cheap way to make it. There are other things you can do with it. It makes different sorts of chemical feedstocks. So you can make alcohol from it, for example, which I think is called ethanol gas here, but that's the idea. So I'm doing that research. One of the things I'm about to do between episodes is I'm going to start working a little more extensively on getting the red science completed. I'm going to work on automating the other science more extensively, including red science. But I need to get red science done because I'm going to need to get... Right now I've got my pistol and no armor, and I am beginning to encroach on these worms, and I need to take some of them out so that I can continue to expand the base. So I'm going to want to get some armor and better guns and turrets probably to help take out some of those worms. So between episodes, research, and starting to produce automatically things, because I haven't had any metals on a belt and I've been doing a lot of pocket crafting. I need to sort of back off on the pocket crafting and let the automation do the work. That is going to put heavier demands on my power, so I'll have to look closely at that. So far, everything is holding up nicely. Anyway, that's the episode. thank you for watching, and I will see you in episode 14.